Superweapons weren't exactly uncommon in the Star Wars universe. They ranged from planet killers to engineered plagues, and over the course of galactic history, the galaxy's cruelest minds thought up plenty of new horrors to darken the stars. But what if we were to tell you that the inventor of one of the galaxy's most horrible superweapons, the Mass Shadow Generator, ended up becoming a Jedi? His name was Bao-Dur, and in this video, we'll be telling his story.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Bao-Dur was an Iridonian Zabrak from a mid-rim colony, born in the years after the Great Sith War of 3996 BBY. From an early age, he was a prodigy, an inventor, and master technician. He specialized in designing energy shield technology, but he was skilled with all sorts of tech, from droids to weapons. Bao-Dur preferred the company of his machines to that of other organics, and between that and his stoic demeanor, many who knew him joked that he himself was secretly a droid in disguise. His closest companion was a droid remote he had built as a child, which he had outfitted with cutting lasers, sensors, and all sorts of other gadgets over the years. But Bao-Dur's world was thrown into chaos when the Mandalorian Wars began. Some of the first worlds the Mandalorians conquered were Iridonia's more remote colonies, which were treated savagely by their conquerors. Bao-Dur was enraged by the massacres his people were being subjected to, so when the Republic raised an army to fight back against the Mandalorian threat, Bao-Dur joined the war effort. He served as a tech in the 12th Engineering Division, and he fought through most of the conflict. As he later recounted, victories were rare, especially at the start, but Bao-Dur celebrated every Mandalorian's death. After several bloody years of war, the tide finally turned in the Republic's favor when the Revanshists, a sect of Jedi crusaders led by Revan and Malak, joined the fight against the Mandalorians. Bao-Dur's division came under the command of one of these new Jedi generals, Meetra Surik, a charismatic leader and one of Revan's most trusted commanders. After 2 further years of fighting, Revan and his followers managed to push the Mandalorians to the brink of defeat, albeit at a staggeringly high cost. In 3960 BBY, with both sides at the breaking point, Revan laid the groundwork for the Mandalorian War's final battle, the Battle of Malachor V. Revan's plan for Malachor involved 2 fleets, both tattered and battle-weary. Meetra Surik was to lead one into battle against the last of the Mandalorian fleets above Malachor, while Revan and Malak would lead the other in a flanking attack once the Mandalorians were engaged. If all went well, the Mandalorians would be caught in the middle and destroyed. If that didn't work, Revan had a backup plan, courtesy of Bao-Dur. In the months before Malachor V, Bao-Dur had worked hard on a new type of weapon for Revan to use, a superweapon called the Mass Shadow Generator. It did exactly what it said on the tin, generating mass shadows, which is to say that it created artificial gravity wells. That sort of technology was commonly used to force ships to drop out of hyperspace, but Bao-Dur weaponized it, designing the generator to build upon gravitational anomalies in the Malachor system to crush targets, destroying entire fleets with the power of gravity. The Mass Shadow Generator was deployed with Meetra Surik's fleet, intended to be used as a last resort should the Mandalorians break through Republic lines. The Battle of Malachor V is best described in Bao-Dur's own words, as spoken to Meetra Surik nearly a decade later.
I dreamt of Malachor. I remember the ships, the last stand of the Republic, the tattered remnants of our fleet, the largest we could gather. But it was damaged, weakened, and vulnerable. The Mandalorians couldn't resist. They tore into us like beasts, shredding our ships to scrap as we fought back. Yet this time there were no reinforcements for either side. Revan had been delayed out-system by Mandalorian scout ships. By the time he arrived, it was too late, and beyond Malachor there were no more Mandalorians left to die. I remember standing on the bridge with you and watching the destruction of the Republic, watching ships full of soldiers and Jedi burn and die. I remember the look you had when you turned to me. It was the longest you'd ever looked at me. You didn't say anything, just a nod. Events moved quickly then, even in my dreams. Flashes, explosions, you falling. I could feel the pain around me. And then the memory, the drifting hulks of the Mandalorian ships, the dead, allies, friends, strangers. And then the echo, lingering, the sound I awakened to in my nightmares.
The mass shadow generator worked too well. It destroyed the Mandalorian fleet, but it also destroyed a good portion of the Republic fleet, and it destroyed Malachor V itself. The planet was shattered and reformed around the mass shadow generator, and thousands of ships were crushed into its blackened crust, their occupants all dying at once in excruciating pain. After the battle, the mass shadows persisted, crushing Malachor in gravity's fist, such that simply walking on its surface was like being buried alive. The mass death was so extreme that the planet itself became a wound in the Force. The Mandalorians were all but completely destroyed by the Battle of Malachor V, largely thanks to Bao-Dur's creation. But Bao-Dur could take little comfort in the victory. He survived the battle, albeit at the cost of his left arm, but he was one of a lucky few. The superweapon, his superweapon, had killed nearly everyone fighting above the planet. The realization of what he had done destroyed Bao-Dur. He left the military after Malachor, racked by guilt and self-loathing. What tore at him most wasn't what he had done, but why he had done it. He had been so consumed by anger and hatred during those final years of the war that he had wanted to slaughter the Mandalorians, and he had designed the mass shadow generator with deliberate genocidal intent. When he realized that, he despised himself over it. After the Mandalorian Wars, he took to wandering the galaxy, alone save only for his remote, sitting out the subsequent Jedi Civil War. As the galaxy was again plunged into chaos, and the Jedi Order was all but destroyed, Bao-Dur stayed out of it all, just trying to come to terms with himself. By the end of the Jedi Civil War, Bao-Dur had recovered a little, enough to want to start making a difference again. He set out wanting to make planetary shield generators for frontier worlds, but there wasn't much demand for them, since, as Bao-Dur put it, more needed to be rebuilt at the time than protected. After 2 devastating back-to-back wars, the Republic was in shambles, and thousands of worlds had been devastated or in some cases, bombed to the point of uninhabitability. To try to get the galaxy back on its feet, the Republic selected one of the latter planets, Telos IV, and set up a terraforming project meant to restore it to habitability. When Bao-Dur learned of this, he decided to get involved. The Telos Restoration Project was initially overseen by a herd of Ithorians, led by the priest, Chodo Habat. Bao-Dur reached out to them, offering assistance, and the Ithorians put him to work designing shield walls to cordon off sections of the planet's surface for terraforming. The Ithorians were planning to restore Telos piecemeal. Using Bao-Dur's shields, they divided the whole planet up into zones and went through the zones one by one, cleaning up the atmosphere and reintroducing flora and fauna to the landscape. Bao-Dur found a degree of peace in helping the Ithorians. He hoped that healing one shattered world would help him atone for destroying another. But a few years into the restoration project, problems arose. Circa Corporation began competing with the Ithorians for the project's contracts, lobbying to be given control of the project so they could make it profitable. They were given control of a handful of restoration zones, which they promptly ruined, as they failed to understand the Ithorians' force-based approach to reviving Telos, deeming it inefficient superstition. Circa's interference threatened the entire restoration project, which, to put it mildly, pissed Bao-Dur off. He travelled to one of the stolen restoration zones and began a one-man campaign of sabotage against Circa, hoping to send a message. However, he was outmatched by the armies of mercenaries Circa had hired to defend their projects, and he was ultimately forced into hiding. It was in one of the Circa-controlled restoration zones that Bao-Dur had an unlikely reunion with an old comrade, Mitra Surik. Surik, who had been exiled from the Jedi Order for her role in the Battle of Malachor V, had come to get Bao-Dur's help in finding her ship, the Ebon Hawk, which had been stolen and was somewhere on Telos' surface. Bao-Dur was able to find the ship thanks to his knowledge of Telos' shield network. It had been taken to an old irrigation plant at one of the planet's icy poles, over which a small shield had been erected despite the fact that it was supposed to be unused. Bao-Dur, the Exile, and their allies travelled to the planet and found that it was occupied by Atreides, one of the last Jedi Masters, who was the one who had stolen the Hawk. At length, the Exile and company were able to retrieve the Ebon Hawk and leave Telos, but not before learning the locations of several other surviving Jedi Masters. The Exile set out on a quest to find these lost Jedi and get them to take action against the Sith, who had recently made themselves known in the galaxy again. Bao-Dur accompanied her, and along the way, he and Surik talked about their experiences at Malachor and tried to come to terms with them. Bao-Dur couldn't help but be inspired by Surik, who was always willing to help others put their lives back together if she could. He followed her lead, and as he did, Surik discovered something unexpected. Bao-Dur was force-sensitive. By this point, there was only one thing holding Bao-Dur back: his anger. The same sense of anger that had driven him to create the mass shadow generator hadn't gone away, and he struggled to overcome it, not wanting to succumb to it ever again. Surik offered to help Bao-Dur overcome his anger by training him in the ways of the Jedi, and Bao-Dur accepted. After weeks of training, he became a Jedi Guardian, and with practice, he was finally able to put his anger behind him and come to terms with himself. The Exile's quest to find the surviving Jedi Masters ultimately ended in disaster when the Masters were all killed by the Sith. But as it turned out, the Masters were never who she was meant to look for in the first place. It was Bao-Dur and the rest of her companions that were the true lost Jedi, the foundation on which the future of the Jedi Order would be built. After the deaths of the Masters, the Sith revealed themselves at last, launching an all-out assault on Telos IV. The Exile and her allies joined the fight, but Bao-Dur split off from the rest of the group during the battle. While the others took the fight to the Sith, Bao-Dur had business on Telos' surface. There was an automated factory hidden beneath the surface of the planet, churning out HK-50 assassin droids. The droids were spread out all over the Republic fleet, meant to be able to systematically cripple it when the command was issued, and they had to be stopped. Bao-Dur and HK-47, another of the Exile's companions, sought out the hidden factory to shut it down. Along the way, Bao-Dur had to sacrifice himself to give HK-47 a chance to get inside the factory, dying for the sake of the Republic. His sacrifice ultimately saved Telos, giving the Republic the opportunity to join the fight against the Sith and turn the tide of the battle. Shortly after the Battle of Telos IV, the Exile and what was left of the Hawk's crew journeyed to Malachor V, which was where the Sith had been striking from the whole time. There, on the Exile's orders, Bao-Dur's droid remote set out to reactivate the mass shadow generator, which would destroy Malachor for good and heal the wounds in the Force there, the source of the Sith's power. Once the Exile defeated the last of the Sith Lords, the remote activated the weapon, and the horrors of Malachor V were wiped away at last. So, that was the story of Bao-Dur, the mass murderer who became a Jedi. But what do you think? Are there other lost Jedi you'd like us to do videos on? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comments below.